Morning. Like to call the executive committee meeting Tuesday, May 28th to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Lear.
Present.
Mr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Lejes.
Present.
Mr. Olthoff.
Present.
Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. Tholen. Mr. Byrne.
Present.
Ms. Weber.
Present.
Mr. Payton.
Present.
Mr. Ritter. Mr. Kinzinger.
Present.
Ms. Haas.
Present.
Mr. Seroy. Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. No public comment today, I don't believe. And then we have no presentations. Approval of the minutes, April 23rd, 2019. Motion to approve, Mr. Burns, second, Mr. Olthoff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under legislative, Mr. Lear, did you have anything to report, or Mr. Olthoff? I see you were handing out paperwork for everybody.
I'll defer to Mr. Olthoff because he attended the meeting this month.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I attended the UCCI membership meeting. What was that, Mr.? Did you have public comment?
I just wondered if you attended the meeting if Florida was full.
The microphone wasn't on. If you want to, are you good? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
All right, going on. I handed out a copy of capital facts on the governor's preliminary draft of the capital plan and what it relies on, 1.8 billion in this year in new or higher taxes. And you'll see the different taxes that are discussed there. And I've got a copy of the items for the capital plan that relates to all the different areas, Northern Illinois, Central, and Southern. If you're interested in that, I don't see anything for Kankakee County in there. But anyway, there was discussion about a meeting to be held August 21 for newly elected county board members. It's a mini version and has to do, this is federal from Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, and Minnesota they're talking about. And then there's also discussion for an Illinois delegation meeting like they had last year that Chairman, you went to, and with Durbin and Duckworth in September or October. So you might keep that in mind. Then Michael D. Kleinick, or Kleinick, gave from the Illinois Department of Labor, talked about the prevailing wage and contract for work must be state subject to prevailing wage, and by June 1, and also your notification of that for certified payrolls will be done electronically after April 1, 2020. And you have to give contractor notice on that and publish by July 15th. That's about all they addressed. That's, so if you have any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Olthoff? Thank you for the update. As far as our capital request, it's not fiscally constrained yet. They don't have a number for that intersection, our big request around CSL. And that's not the traffic light, it's the whole intersection there at Armour at 50. While there are never any guarantees in this situation, I'm assured that once there is a number for that, then that will be inserted in the proper, if it's a capital bill or if it's something that sits outside of it. So it's a high on the priority list of both parties in Springfield. So I do feel very good about that if the commitments are followed through on for us here. So moving on, can I get a motion to amend the agenda to let Health Department go first? Mr. Hess, Mr. Payton, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Do you want to, Mr. B? Oh, I'm sorry. You can come up, John, if you want to, while he's doing that. Hold on just a second. Okay.
Thank you. You said on the intersection, is that going to work all the way back to the bridge?
It's both bridges. It's both directions.
Both directions?
Yeah, towards Cardinal and towards Armour.
Okay.
I mean towards the railroad tracks
right
over there. Yeah, it's both directions. The thought is to also do it at the same time that they're going to do the bridge. You know, kind of like pulling the Band-Aid off all at once, because then they could close 2 lanes one way, then flip over and do the other side.
Do the other side.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's widening its traffic lights instead of stop signs where, you know, The entrances in there to Denny's and back in that area. So it's a whole improvement with walking, paths and everything. So
Is there proposed turn lane going each way, going into the north end?
yes, there's turn
Entrance?
lanes going on both ways. Exactly. Coming from the west and coming from the east.
East.
Yeah, both.
Two-
That's why it's going to have to be wide.
White.
We're in phase 2 engineering with IDOT, which is they only do 3 phases. The final engineering comes in phase 3. So phase 2 on IDOT's own dime is they're doing that right now. So that's why there's not a number, because we just got a request to include a bus stop over there from River Valley Metro. So we're looking to look and see how that fits into everything. So there a lot of moving parts. That's why it's hard to get a number to put in a capital bill. If that makes sense, because we're almost to that point, but not quite.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Beavis?
Thank you. Good morning. And I appreciate Chairman Wheeler the opportunity to be able to go first. I've got some other meetings scheduled here right after this one, so it's going to help me out to accommodate this. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was that this year we were up for renegotiation for the contract between our union and administration at the health department. We began those negotiations in November. It took 5 months. I think we finished up in early April. We had about 10 meetings. 2 of those were canceled, but we have reached a tentative agreement, and then the Board of Health approved that last meeting. So we're finished there, and I was going to go over just kind of a little bit of what it was that was done within our contract. Just for your information, my understanding is now that we don't necessarily need to have the county board's finalized stamp of approval, I guess, since the Board of Health is overseeing the health department and approved it. But what we tried to do, my main goal was to follow along with what other contracts that had just been ratified prior to ours, and that was keep the salary raises in line with the county so that there wouldn't be any issues there. Obviously, they came in with a higher number. We came in with a lower number, but we worked it out to where at the end we came across with it's a 4-year contract. This would be the first year, so it's retroactive back to December 1st for our year, which I believe mirrors the county's also. And so it's 3% for each of those 4 years. We definitely know that within this year and going into next year, the health department is not going to have an issue being able to accommodate that in regards to our budget and our proposed budgets in relation to the grants that we already had in place and the ones that we're in the process of applying for the fiscal year 20 year. Obviously, excuse me, 2 years out, things are a little iffy, but that's the way these contracts work. But historically, the biggest issue we had previously was when the state was in its was having issues with either the budget not being approved, and or then when the budget was approved, the state didn't have the contracts ready for us, and that was creating the issues with the health departments not being paid on time. And then that's when we saw impacts on our budget. Otherwise, everything is, running in smoothly with everything that we've got. So we anticipate that this 3% is not going to be an issue. One of the other biggest things that we did, I had presented a proposal at the beginning. It had been 12 years since the health department had looked at any of its starting salaries for any of the employees.
That's good.
So we did a survey of across the state with as many health departments as would give us the information. We tried to focus on health departments that were similar in size to Kankakee County, and then trying to look then at some of the positions that might have been a little bit different, and then just trying to put the starting salaries for today's standards in relation to what they were. So we had a number of frontline employees positions that were adequately low, and with the state obviously pushing to have the minimum wage raised, we weren't anywhere close to that. So we've gotten a lot closer to that. Again, that's affordable and within the budget. We really only have a handful of newer employees that this is really going to impact anyway. So once the contract is signed and approved, that starting salary is going to impact about 5 to 6 people. The rest of them have been there long enough that they're already making above those salary levels anyway. So that's not going to be an issue. And again, it was something that we were able to determine could be absorbed within the budget. And then what we did was so that we don't have to keep coming back every 10 to 12 years to raise the starting salaries, we've put that within the contract. And then it's going to just kind of raise just a little bit each year to sort of just keep us fair with the area. So that we hopefully then don't have to keep addressing this. And then if we get to a point where it's kind of like we can't afford this, then potentially we could discuss having taken it out or putting a freeze on the rates. I'll go through a few of these changes, and then if anyone has any questions. Another issue that we had, that we talked about, that we presented was for probationary employees. They really didn't have a mechanism in which if they called off sick, you hire a new employee, it's expected that they work 6 months and not be sick and not have any days off or anything like that. And we hire a lot of predominantly females, younger, they might have families, and they're going to have sick kids, or they might get sick themselves. Life just happens. And so the only mechanism we had in place for those first 6 months were, understandably, if they needed to be off, we allowed them to be off, but all we could do was write them up for it, and we didn't think that that was fair. So we put in there that ultimately, within that probationary period, they can take up to 2 days, and they can use half-day increments of personal unpaid time. So it wouldn't be a penalty against them. They wouldn't be written up for it, but it would allow them potentially to call in sick or have to go home if they've got to take their child home for the day because they need to go to the doctor. So that was one thing that got added. We changed the language in our bereavement to mirror what the circuit clerk's language was, just in relation to creating a better definition of what personal time was that an individual could use for the bereavement time when it was for an individual that didn't qualify. So if it wasn't an immediate family member, but they were requesting time off for bereavement day, currently it said that I could allow that if they took personal time, but it really didn't say what that personal time was. So we clarified that language for them. And then lastly, the thing I'm probably most proud of is that we were able to get a smoke-free campus. So those were the biggest things. The rest of the contract stayed the same. Like I said, we tried to continue to do, there were some other requests that maybe they typically do that. This was my first negotiation, so it was quite an experience. I learned a lot, and I think it's like a poker game. So I don't know if I won or lost. But I feel like with the salary adjustments that we made, that went in line with what the county's trying to do. It was affordable for us, and it was a little bit higher than what had previously been done the last contract. Are there any questions?
Mr. Olthoff.
Thank you, Chairman. That little bit each year on the starting salary, is there a percent attached to that?
It's either 1% or half of what the raise would be, so that if there's a smaller raise, so 1.5 would be, it'd be 1.5 going with the 3%. If they get 2%, then it would be half of that. So right now for the current contract, because it's a 3-year, or I'm sorry, 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%, then that adjustment will be half of that.
For starting salary?
For the starting salary base pay,
And
not for each employee.
And that's going to be 15? I mean, does it?
No, some of them right now are currently,
minimum wage.
well, right, once we get to that stage, then we may have to then say we need to make an adjustment and stop. But for these 4 years.
Okay. I think I understand.
So the language is, for these 4 years, that's what it is, and then we're gonna reassess after that, or is it written in that way, or is it? I'm just curious. I mean, it's your contract.
It's not written in that way, no. Let me see, blue is the money.
It isn't tied to cost of living increase at all.
Starting rates for the job classifications within the bargaining unit effective upon ratification by the union, with such increases then to be made retroactive to the union. Sorry, it's on the next page. Effective December 1st of the subsequent years of this agreement, the starting rate shall be increased by the lesser of 1% or 1/2 of the negotiated wage increase set forth in section 1. So when we get to the next one, again, that's affordable for us for this contract. As we get to the next stage, then if we feel that we need to put a freeze on that or adjust it, then that's what we would pull out and begin to negotiate.
Gotcha. Mr. Payton?
Just for my own knowledge, how did the contract define personal time?
It'd be comp time. So if they had any comp time that they'd build up, it could be vacation time, it could be a personal day. And in instances that I don't necessarily agree with, but has been allowed previously through other contracts and had been past practice within the health department before I took over, extended illness time.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions for Mr. Beavis?
Chairman?
I heard voices. Oh, Mr. Washington, sorry.
Oh,
Boy, that threw me. Thank you, sir.
It's been my understanding that the health department did the deciding on the contracts all along. Am I incorrect in that? John, you said that it no longer needed the county board. We only looked at it and gave cursory approval after the health department had approved it. Is that not correct?
that appears to be correct, but I didn't realize that, and just in looking at each of the previous 3 contracts, it all had the signature pages and had the rubber stamp of the county board and officials at that point. So we had just gone through the motions that once the Board of Health approved it, I had reached out to Chairman Wheeler to say, okay, what committee do I need to go through? And then to get to the county board, which was anticipated to be the June 11th meeting. And then that's when it was discussed that we don't necessarily need to do that.
That's correct.
And so, Anita, were you part of that conversation?
Yes.
Could you let the committee know that you spoke with State's Attorney's Office and all that kind of stuff? Just basically what happened behind the scenes.
Correct. I emailed them. I haven't heard back this morning, but I just wanted to clarify that based on my past experience, the only authority that the county board has is that levy process. And when I talked to John about it, he said, well, how does the board approve it? I said, well, if they don't like the way you're managing, I've seen where they might cut your levy the next year and say you're not spending appropriately. That is really the board's only authority when it comes to the health department. So their board has already approved and signed it. I called and left a message for Graham, and I sent an email both to Graham and Nancy. I haven't had their confirmation back. But
Okay.
yeah.
So you have this committee as my commitment. If they come back and say, yes, you do need to rubber stamp it, which to me doesn't make sense, we'll bring it back here for an approval. Okay, but as it stood right now, things like this, we shouldn't even, it's good that you gave us an update, but you don't need us to approve it.
Okay.
You know, so.
I appreciate that, and we'll work we want to work together with the county. We're county employees too, so that when there are negotiations, we don't want, to be having this golden apple, so to speak, over here that isn't following along with what the rest of the county is trying to accomplish.
Sure.
Thank you.
It just sends that message that, we're the financial control arm of a lot, but there are certain things within the county that we are not. Your department being one of them.
Okay.
So, makes sense? Okay. Any other questions? Good
And
deal.
I
Thank
just
you.
had 2 more quick things real quick. Last month, we had 2 presentations, 2 recognitions for the health department. The first one was from the Illinois Department of Public Health. They came one day and presented us a certificate that we were a champion of health. They do this every April as part of Public Health Month. and we were recognized for a project that we're working on with some Pembroke youth in regards to a farming initiative for the youth out there. So that's something that Laura Stuba, through our community outreach and planning, has been working with them, and it's still a process and trying to finalize the details for everything through the school out there and how this will work. And we're kind of at a timeout because school's out for the summer, but as we pick it up in the fall. But through that work and those efforts, the state recognized us with that Champions of Health certificate. And then also towards the end of the month, Pledge for Life went around to a number of organizations, including the health department, to recognize us as being a trauma-informed organization, and for the work that we and the rest of a number of organizations within the county are doing through this MAP process to try to make Kankakee County a better trauma-informed community in regards to children and our health in the long term as a result of trauma and how it impacts us early in life and how that affects us later in life. So I was, kudos to all the staff at the health department who work on those projects. I get to get my picture taken and posted on things, but really it's them that are doing all the hard work, and I just get to hold a certificate. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Got a half hour to get on your call.
Yeah.
Alrighty, moving on to Mr. Duval, Information Services.
Okay, again, I'll try to keep it quick, hopefully. Just a monthly update. As far as the PC upgrade throughout the county, we are on track and we are on budget. We're right where I hoped we'd be, maybe a little bit ahead. We're in the county clerk's office, and we're also in the judicial office at the time. Judicial, so judicial pays for all of their upgrades. We just provide the labor for that. Both of those offices will go somewhat slower than the other ones because they have less redundancy. Judges are very specific of what they do. Each one of their chambers is different than the next one. And then once we're done with the judges, we have to come back around and hit their courts. If you've ever been in our courthouse, each one of the courts are different. So we actually have to more hand-holding and be very specific to that. The county clerks, while you see people down there, there's less of them that, while they cover each other, but they're more specific for their tasks. So to make sure we never take them down, we have to go somewhat slower in schedule and make sure that they're always open to the public. That's been no big deal. We knew that that was coming. In addition, with the county clerk, we'll probably be in and out of that office for the remaining year because they are not only doing their PCs, we're going to be upgrading their servers, their software. Dan's in the process of upgrading voting software. We have to wait for him to do that, but that's the type of things that would take somewhat longer for them. Other than the PC, Dan secured funding for all of his changes, so he has a grant that's going to pay for that, which makes that a lot easier to deal with. That's not an expense to the county board. So basically, we're on track, we're on budget, we're proceeding exactly where I hoped us to be at this point. The next issue I would say is I've had some conversation with some board members about spoofed email. As you probably know, across the world, it's a worldwide epidemic. As I've informed you, it actually starts more with the end user. The one thing about spoof emails, they're kind of obvious if you look at them. They're not like the viruses where you can look at them. They're asking you to do something silly. So it starts with you looking at it, of which everybody's done great. But I do also appreciate that you've also notified us that it's going on. So that tells us something we need to address further. We did address further, implement a couple other important things behind the scenes. I send more detailed report to Chairman and to Anita. I don't want to waste your time by going over to that stuff. They're more specific back end type of things. What it will possibly affect you is if you receive emails now that are spoofed, you're more likely to receive them into your junk mail. If you get the junk mail, you can just assume that's what they were at that point. Nothing's 100%, but it should be much better than that. My recommendation is I would just delete it, or if you have any question, call that person, see, did you mean to send me something? But it's usually safer just to delete it and then call. Spoof emails, the reason that they're hard to block is they don't contain a virus. They don't contain a Trojan, so there's nothing to stop. They're a legitimate email, sorta. They've just changed things on them. I've told you that they can, the simple things, because I don't want to tell you the back end again. I don't want to gloss your eyes over it. There are other things that they can do that makes it hard. So it's something that's easy for me to describe to you, but it's very difficult. That's why the world has a problem with it. It's easy for the end user, the bad user, the bad person to implement this, to cause problems throughout the world for it. Because email by general 30, 40 years ago was never designed to be secure. It was never designed to block people from doing it. Back then they had more of a problem actually communicating with other people. So it was so open, they never anticipated people using it as it is today. That's what caused the issues. But we have implemented things. Each one of the emails coming from the county is digitally signed. And we have reports that go out to all of the internet service providers. I now get flooded every day with reports about where it's helping them, they're blocking. I'm not flooded, but they're blocking. It's helping them. We can see it's doing it, but I get a report from all across the world saying, these happened here, and yes, we did block something. So we do see it's happening, not foolproof, but I can see it's dramatically making an effect. You may still get something, but you all been doing well about it.
Mr. Rosoff.
Thank you, Chairman. Kevin, do you have AT&T for your provider?
Here?
Yeah.
We have the corporate or enterprise version fiber here. So it's not the same as if you would have in the home, but yes, AT&T is our main provider.
I just was told about this by a friend yesterday, and I put it on for if you're an AT&T user. It's called Call Protect, and you put that in your app. Just go on your app and type in Call Protect, and it'll come up, and you install it, and it'll protect your phone calls. You know, all these robocalls you get and stuff, and you're never sure. And I just had one come in, and it says AT&T alert spam risk, and so I don't answer it. That's a handy thing.
That's different than what we're addressing.
You're talking emails.
Yeah, we have their internet access. We don't deal with the phone, and we have an internal digital system here. I don't think you have that problem. I haven't seen any. You get any messages for phones for?
Not at this address. I have with some other addresses I have where it's a link saying download your voicemail message, and don't ever click that. Don't. Because it's not a message.
But what this one does, it takes it, you don't answer it, and it just tells you it's a spam risk.
Yes, that's an excellent thing. And spam isn't just email. It's, as you know, on the phones. And now that everybody has an automated system for their phone, yes, I can see where it's not what we're talking about, but it's a great
got the same
product.
Call within an hour 3 times.
I got a call from a board member. I answered it, and it was somebody trying to sell me insurance. It came up with the board member's name on the phone. Yeah, automated. Hi, it was bizarre. So the random number generator that they use actually came up with one of our board members.
Do you ever get your own phone call?
No.
Mine comes up, it's Bill Olthoff.
I've got mine now.
Yeah.
I have gotten that.
Sit there and talk to yourself all day, right?
Yeah.
I do appreciate that when board members contact us and let us know if things happen, because that's what allowed us to decide to go and implement some further things. Of course, we do these things within the budget. It's pretty complete now. There's maybe a few other things, but it would cost more. But honestly, they would just help identify it. They're not going to stop it anymore.
So the end result is I don't need any gift cards from anybody. So please don't send me any. Unbelievable. Any other non-specific questions about this? Because we definitely don't want to get into the specifics, but what's scary about this is it is specific, and it's going from one elected official to another. So these people are doing some work on the back end to find out the relationships between people. That's what's kind of weird about this whole thing.
Yeah, this is not bots. When you get spoofing, there are some spoofing bots. These are people that are targeting your area because they know that this person may contact this person, and they said that's why but still, if you read it, that person's not going to ask you to do that. What I more worry about from an IT professional is you want to make sure somebody's not testing to see your environment and see if people click on things. Because then that's really just, we're sending somebody that tests the wall so we can actually send the virus and thing later. So I appreciate that everybody's actually operating exactly what we need to, so that it helps us.
Any other questions? Thanks, Kevin. Nothing for schools today. VAC, Karen Smatansky, got a monthly report. Motion to approve the monthly report. Mr. Hess, second. Mr. Lear, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed. Alrighty, you got anything?
Morning.
Morning. We need a microphone, sir. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman, board members, office employees, my name is Mike Pekin. I am a Vietnam veteran. I was appointed to the VAC Commission by the Disabled Veterans, Chapter 34. And I have since been appointed superintendent of the VAC along with Mr. Richard Kuiper. I'm sorry. Anyway, I have lived in the area my entire life except for 3 years in the military. I've been working in the VAC office, learning processes and stuff like that. Our commission, pardon?
It's just, if you could talk a little closer to the mic, we're having trouble hearing you. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Oh, I apologize.
Omnipotent voice from above.
Do I need to repeat anything?
No.
Did you get me?
Got your name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, Rich and I have both been working in the office. Everything is running good. We have quite a commission. Anybody there is ready to jump in and help if need be. But I kind of like to put a face with a name. That's why I dropped in today. I doubt if too many of you really know who I am. My name hasn't been in the paper since the early 80s. Hey, my family and I won the Christmas coloring contest 3 years in a row and then got kicked out. I'm sorry. Lord forgive me. Anyway, that's all I have. I just wanted to drop in, say hello, and if you have any questions for me, shoot.
Any questions from the committee?
All right.
Don't think so. Thanks for coming in.
Made that simple. Thank you.
Alrighty. Under County Administrator's Report, Anita Speckman.
Good morning.
Morning.
So first you have in front of you the staffing report. It was actually pretty quiet month this month. A lot of the open positions got filled. You can see animal control picked up 2 of their openings in full-time and then their part-time clerk. That clerk had moved from a part-time clerical position to a kennel tech several months ago. The position was open for a few months, and then now they just backfilled that clerk position. You can see Sandy's circuit clerk office she did hire 2 full-time and then had one of her rather new people, it might be one of the same ones, leave, was here a couple weeks and then turned in her resignation. Just a word on the coroner part-time person. That is not actually a headcount increase, or it won't be. What was happening was because these part-time deputy coroners work on their days off from the fire department or paramedic department where they work full-time, the 2 he had were kind of on the same schedule. So when he needed a fill-in, he had a problem trying to get one. So it's really just kind of a filler when no one else is able to make it. It won't be any additional hours or anything. It's because you won't have the other 2 on board. Other than that, you had 2 new deputies join us. And then down in the state's attorney, the 2 part-time are not permanent part-time. They are 2 summer interns. So, and before I got here today, I did get via email from the highway department, their 3 interns for the summer that'll probably started today. I assume that's why I got it this morning. So that's not reflected, that'll be reflected next month. But they always historically hire 3 summer interns, and I got those this morning, so. Any questions at all on the report?
Yes, sir. Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment. I really appreciate this report. At a glance, you can see what's happening from a year back and forward. It's very, very well done. Thank you.
Sure. The other thing that I have is the use of county property. As the chairman and I talked through this policy, there was nothing in here that discussed vehicles that are taken home by employees at night. And this could be something like, it may not be a taxable income issue, and you can see that that's defined on the back of the page. The IRS defines if an employee takes a vehicle home, it becomes taxable income, and when it doesn't. There was nothing in our county policy that really addressed that situation. And so working with the chairman, we added that verbiage into this policy. And so this too has gone to our liability carrier, the state's attorney's office, and was distributed to all the departments at last Friday's department head meeting. So we've vetted it. I'm still waiting to hear back from the state's attorney's office on the review of this as well, but I didn't get any feedback from anyone else on this. It's really going to be very few departments that it hits. And in fact, the highway department has already been meeting the IRS guidelines for several years for the county engineer that takes a vehicle home. So they've been doing the proper treatment of that for several years.
And so, this is something that when I was, a board member just like you sitting there 4 years ago, had a real problem with this because there was counties out there getting fined and having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars back to the IRS. It was I think Kendall might have been one of them. That was hit big. And so I apologize. I kind of forgot about it for a little while. And I found that file that I had been saving with the communications with the IRS and turned that all over to Anita and said, can you make sense of my nonsense? And then she put it all together. So it's one of those things where I think that I know that we would be protected here, and we've addressed really where the only risk is. I believe there's like 3 vehicles that go home at highway, and the only other the department here that would be impacted potentially is planning. But they don't really take them home. They would take them home if they have to go somewhere in the morning, but you still can't do that. That's per the IRS. But there's $1.50 per trip safe harbor that they would have to, and so we'll just keep track of those things and as we go forward. So, Mr. Olthoff. Was this an IRS template?
No, a lot of the wording is from IRS regulations, but it's pieced together.
But it qualifies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Actual had emails from the IRS asking questions about this. They were a little bit old. They're like 3.5 years old, but it was one of those files I had sitting there, and I was like, oh, hey, I forgot about this. We got to get going on this. So, yeah, a little proactive, Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was there any pushback from any department heads?
Not a word.
Good, thank you.
And then the only other thing I had, I wanted to let you know, I know you're all waited with bated breath for your county IDs. Shockingly, I have had some difficulty in getting photographs from some of the board members. The sheriff's department wanted them all at once instead of piecemeal one by one. So I was holding off. I sent them everything I had. I'm still missing 5, but I sent the 22, 23 that I had out there on a flash drive late last week. So those should be done probably sometime this week. So as soon as we get those, we'll get those distributed, and then it'll be obvious who didn't comply.
Can I get a motion to approve the county use of property policy? Mr. Legess,
yes,
second.
sorry.
Mr. Byrne. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Sorry, Andy.
No, that's okay.
Skipped right over
Yeah.
it. Anything else? Any other questions? Oh,
Mr.
Hess.
Hess.
Should we make that contingent with,
Approval of
from the state's attorney's office, if it's approved by the state's attorney's office?
Yeah, we'll have them take a look at it. Yeah, definitely, for sure.
I mean, in
Yeah.
the motion, it should it be like that?
Motion should say that. Are we okay with the amendment, the first and the second? Mr. Legess was the first.
I'm fine with that.
Who was the second? Mr. Byrne? Okay. All right, then we're good then. Yep.
Make sure we don't want to approve it and then they come back and say,
Alrighty, moving on. Under administrative, I've got the reappointment of Dr. Don Dakey to the Ethics Commission, reappointment of Dr. Abraham Curian to the Kankakee County Board of Health, Dr. Simon Wu to the Kankakee County Board of Health, David Schaefer to the Minnie Creek Drainage District. These are reappointments. And the appointment of Timothy J. Wilhelm to the Kankakee River Valley Forest Preserve District to fill the unexpired term of Mr. Ken Allers. Motion to combine and approve on those, please. Mr. Legess, second. Mr. Olthoff. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Alrighty, openings. Probably should send some letters out on these when we get a chance, because these are long-standing. One opening on the BM Lewis Drainage District, one on the Grinnell Special Drainage District, one on Gar Creek Drainage, 2 on the Mantino number 3 Drainage District, 1 opening on Mantino number 9 Drainage District, one resident opening on the Kankakee County Housing Authority Board, 1 opening on the Kankakee River Valley Forest Preserve, 1 opening on the Bourbonnais Fire Protection District, 1 opening on the Kankakee County Ethics Commission. Alrighty, moving on to new business. We have the Title VI adoption for transportation. This came out of PZA. Let me get back to this real quick. So that is once again not included in the packet. Oh, here it is. Sorry. Sorry about that. I got blank stares from planning back there. So as I had spoken to Mr. Kinzinger before the meeting, Title VI deals with some very specific things. Title VII actually includes religion in that. So that's the reason we have to, and you guys can explain better if you would so choose to take the microphone in the back. We have to adopt Title VI in order to be eligible for our federal transportation money. It's very specific in that. We've adopted other parts of the federal guidelines as part of our policy and procedure manual. So we're covered as far as the state goes. So I don't know if you can speak to any of that.
Yeah, there's if you receive federal highway money as a direct, either subrecipient or pass-through agency, you're obligated by the Federal Highway Administration to pass a Title VI plan, which covers the categories under Title VI, and then that really creates a complaint process. Everybody in the U.S. is governed by the 1964 Civil Rights Act subsequent amendments to that as recent as 1993, executive orders in 2000. All of these laws govern what we do. This is just for being a direct grant recipient. So this is one of our transit agencies, so they can put together Title VI and then have a complaint policy where if somebody felt that they were being discriminated against, they have a formal process for the complaint process. And that's just as an agency, they receive it that way. So that's what we're moving forward with to satisfy the grant condition.
Sure. Any questions there, Mr. Hess?
Make the motion.
Making the motion, a second. Let's go with Mrs. Haas. Any other questions for Ben on this process? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. Now the next item, our next two items we'll be discussing at the same time, really, is something that I will advise the committee that I will be abstaining from, as it involves my employer, directly and indirectly. So I just wanted to make sure but I'll help answer any questions and guide conversation as the case may be. So unless anybody has any problems with that, just want to make sure you got a problem with that. No. So go ahead, Ben, if you wanted to go through some.
So these are two of the same piece. In 2014, the county board adopted an ordinance and subsequent intergovernmental agreement between the county, Manteno, Hopkins Park, Grant Park, and the Village of Momence. In order to amend any of the territory within an enterprise zone, we are obligated to follow a state set process, and one of the steps in that process is to have a public hearing. On the 21st, we had a public hearing in Momence Village Hall to hear the merits of the project. It's attended by the board, the governing board of the enterprise zone, made up of the chief elected officials of the 5 entities. Out of that hearing, we took no formal public comment. Nobody attended. It's a pretty common thing. Now we're going around to the member jurisdictions for the passage of an amendment. So we have two items. One is a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign the intergovernmental agreement, and the other is an ordinance amending the existing ordinance. So we have the 2014 ordinance on record. We're amending it to change the boundary by 90 acres in 2 locations adjacent to Momence, but within the county, for 2 project expansions for Van Drunen Farms. Right around, you want to say CapEx out loud, or is that? It's a fairly substantial investment from the company. This is a job-creating exercise. In order to move forward with that, the company's coming to us and saying, this is a piece that helps them make the numbers make sense for their expansion. We allow the building material sales tax exemption once the amendment is made, so they can be tax exempt on their building materials. They can then apply for the subsequent property tax abatement, which is the graded tax abatement.
And so, just to explain, your capacity is not just for planning right now. You are
also newly elected enterprise zone administrator for the Kankakee County Enterprise Zone. As the enterprise zone administrator, I am formalizing the application, so I'm going to this board and the 4 other boards with these ordinances and changes to the IGA. We'll then compile the entire application, get it to Springfield, get it turned around. Once we have certification of that application, we'll be able to go to the company and say, now you can start your project in order to qualify for that incentive.
So, Mr. Wilson, do you have any other affiliations with anything to do with enterprise zones in the state of Illinois?
I'm the sitting president of the Illinois Enterprise Zone Association. December 31st, I'll be the past president, so I have a two-year term at the end of this. I've been an Enterprise Zone Association board member for close to 11 years now. I've done quite a few things with Enterprise Zone. I've managed 6 enterprise zones in the state of Illinois. So this is something we're very comfortable with at the planning department taking on, so we can do the legwork in-house. We don't have to hire an outside consultant. We'll call it a value add, a little cost-saving measure. But we'll get it out as quickly as possible, as within a reasonable time, so the state can work on their end.
Mr. Olthoff.
Is Van Drunen Farms an agricultural enterprise?
Yes.
Is it also a business, and that's why they use the enterprise zone?
Yeah, so as an agribusiness, they kind of fit in a couple categories on that one, and that's why their taxability and Chairman Wheeler is far more versed on this than I am, but their taxability changed a little bit because of they sell products. It's not necessarily just a farm stand or whatever. They do a lot more than that. So yeah, they're building. I mean, the facilities are state of the art. This equipment is taxed like any other manufacturing equipment would be. If you were making diesel fuel, it's it's different equipment, but it's the same technical process. And so their equipment is taxed like any other manufacturer would be taxed. That's why they want to be exempt from that activity.
Mr. Hess?
Thank you, Chairman. Aren't we regulated by the acreage and everything in the enterprise zone? How close are we getting to be to the maximum?
So we currently have 1,299 and some change acres. This is an addition of 90 acres. So we'll be just under 2 square miles left. So we've got quite a bit of acreage left at 12, let's call it an even 1,200 acres. So there's quite a bit left. Now, like anything else, if we wanted to, we can amend the boundary to remove territory in one area and add it to another area. And as we would do the application at the same time, I could take 100 acres, from the north end and add it to the south end. And because it happens at the exact same time, we never would go over that limit. Okay. So if there was some area added for maybe Ileana adjacent that we're not necessarily utilizing at this point and we needed it, we could pull that out. But right now, 1,200 acres is plenty for the 5 jurisdictions to have some wiggle room in the map. This is the first amendment to this enterprise zone for being 3 years old. That's pretty good. So they did a really good job, Mike and Dell and the team, when they put the enterprise zone application together of getting all the areas we thought we were going to need to get into the zone. So we knew we were going to make some amendments over time, but that's why we're in front of you today.
I'd say it's been a very productive zone for the Moments businesses and people in that area. Also, there is another enterprise zone that's one of 2.
Right.
So, and I don't know how the acreage of that one stacks up. That one seems to be pretty full, as I remember. But
the eye test on it looks a little bigger. I know they're closer to their boundary, but they've still got some flexibility there too. And that is where, if it's county property, we could utilize either zone. So if it's advantageous to run a connecting strip, and I know in your maps maybe it's a little difficult to see, we're talking about a 3-foot wide connecting strip to make the zones contiguous. So we could run down the county highway and add a piece of property if we needed to, if we saw the benefit of that. And that's where the governing board has a discussion about the benefit of these expansions. Do they create jobs? Do they elicit capital investment to better the zone, to further our mission, to further the goals of our sets? So
I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve it.
Mr. Hess, motion. Second, Mr. Legess. Any other questions for Ben? Mr. Kinzinger, yes.
I appreciate the work you did on this. I'm a major proponent of enterprise zones, thinks it's one of the better things the state of Illinois has done, and wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
Great. Alrighty, I guess let's do a roll call vote, because at some point there may be an application fee, even though it's being reimbursed to the county by the employer.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Legess?
Aye.
Mr. Olthoff?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Aye. Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Ms. Haas? Aye. Motion carries.
thank you.
Alrighty. Moving on. If I could circle back, was that a motion to combine and approve those 2 items? Because there's 2 separate items. Okay. Yeah, it's just 2 separate items on the agenda. I just want to get that clear for the record, that was a combine and approve. That's on both of those. Thank you. The next item is something I put on the agenda. In the past, I've been approached by multiple department heads to have all of Kankakee County's properties as a tobacco-free zone. And in light of some other things that have happened recently, especially with Mr. Beavis announcing today that they had negotiated that, which is a little different. I didn't know that was something that could be collectively bargained, but we'll address that when the time comes. But I wanted to get this committee's sense of what they think about this. Tobacco-free, many private businesses, counties, municipalities have done this, and they're not. That we have secession programs through our insurance carrier. We can provide resources for people, you know, to help to get them to quit smoking or chewing. But the first thing is to gauge this committee's opinion on, is this a road that we want to go down? I can tell you that the huddles of people smoking and the cigarette butts that I see outside of the entrances to our buildings are concerning to me. And the health reason, the appearance reason, productivity, all of that. So I'm just curious on what this committee's thoughts are along those lines. Is this a road you want to go down? Mr. Legess.
I absolutely would. My question though was, when he mentioned smoke-free, isn't that different than tobacco-free?
Yes, it is. That's why I'm doing tobacco-free. I'd said the whole thing.
Well, yeah, I was gonna mention that fact that maybe their contract should have read tobacco-free. But
Yeah.
I agree that tobacco-free is the way to go, because now I know in the past some employees get away with chewing because it's not smoke, you know.
Right.
So I'm in agreement with it.
Mr. Olthoff.
Thank you, Chairman. What about vaping?
That would be tobacco use, would it not? Is vape, or is it just pure nicotine?
I think it's just.
I don't know. Ex-smokers are the worst. That's me. I found, you know, very preachy. So I don't know. Maybe that's something we should
Any
incorporate.
vapors in here?
Any vapors?
Can answer that question?
Anyone?
How about no?
It's just pure nicotine.
I can see how the next discussion's gonna go.
I'm sorry, this went sideways quickly. So you know, you're right. You know, but you know the question is tobacco. See, then what about Nicorest and the gums? You know, and the people chewing the gums so they don't smoke. That is it. How's that different than vaping?
Nicotine free?
Yeah, I don't know. We should talk about that. Yes, Mrs. Weber.
I hope that, and I think you probably do have a plan, but if I were one of the smokers, I really want to hear your plan for what's happening now. Instead of going crazy at 10:30.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thought would be is it doesn't seem to be you can stop people from smoking, but they would have to not be on county property to do so. So they would have to leave the premises, just like they do with the health department. They cannot smoke on the property or the parking lot or in the vehicles when they're driving people around.
So they go to some private property next stop?
Yeah. Like they do with the hospitals are all standing on the sidewalk.
Oh.
Very similar. Mr. Kinzinger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am a non-smoker, have never smoked in my life, not even tried a cigarette. But I'm somewhat hesitant with this policy. We all have flaws and problems. I would rather see provisions made for those who have those kind of problems than to outlaw the thing on county property. I think it'll end up costing us money.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this, Mr. Byrne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It just seems that's a trend in the private sector, public sector. Seems everything, my employers have all had smoke-free or campuses. I mean, if you have a designated area where they can't go off campus, I guess that's appropriate. I agree with Mr. Kinzinger. You don't want to limit people's ability to choose or make choices for their lives, but still, it is our property and it is our ability to restrict and non-restrict what we can and cannot happen on it.
Yeah, it's far be it for me to be preachy on health. I haven't never met a carb I didn't like, but what messages do we send on our health insurance premiums if we're not trying to help people live healthier lives? You know, and that's part of it too. That's why you pay for in your health plan for secession programs, because it ends up saving the county money in the long run. So what's the committee's pleasure? Is there a motion to look into this further and come back with some language or what's possible and what's not possible? I mean, you tell me. I do what you guys want to do here. I have my own opinion, but this is a board decision, and I just thought I'd bring it up.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, there's a motion to look into it further, bring it back to executive with a firm plan for next month.
Yes.
Is there a second to that? Mr. Legess. Any more discussion on that? Yes, Mrs. Weber.
As in anything, when you make a rule, there needs to be punishment if you don't follow it.
Correct, and that's why I wonder if that's where collective bargain situations come in. You know, if you're on property smoking, you know, I can tell you that where the employee entrance to the courthouse, less than 5 feet away is piles of cigarette butts and people smoking. It's supposed to be 15 feet. And so that part is that's a situation.
Yep.
You know, so how far away is far enough away? So, okay, we have a motion and a second. Basically, talk to the state's attorney's office, see what we legally can do. I see other counties doing it, so
Sure.
it's either, that doesn't mean it's correct, because stuff passes, as we've learned, that is incorrect, and it's on the books until you figure out it needs to be changed. But I'll bring it back, and we'll talk more about it. Sound good? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. All right. Any old business we need to bring up? Other business? Mr. Legess.
I had a question on the phone hookups. Do you have to have a landline, or can you do it on a cell phone?
Phone hookups for this? That's Kevin, I think the program we use has to be a machine. It can't be it has to be a PC and not a phone, correct? Unless there's an app. Hold on, sorry.
I want to make sure I understand the question right to give you the right answer.
Is George via phone?
No.
No, but yes, we can do it by a phone. We can do it by an iPad, but it always runs better from a location where you've got actually internet hardwired to your house. Now you can go over your Wi-Fi to get to it, but we've tested with phones. In fact, every time I do test it, I test it from my phone. So if you have a newer generation phone, we can actually make that work, whether or not you want to hold the phone for an hour and a half meeting. And it may cause problems because phones can drop in and out. So it's always best that you have a PC or a laptop there we work with.
At home on a computer.
He's at home, but to be honest, we can do it from a phone. It's just it's not going to look as good as that.
Okay.
So I'm going to
I
be.
just was curious.
Okay. And I don't think it'll work on your flip phone either. So.
No. Does it work on an iPhone? An iPhone, Kevin? Will it work on an iPhone?
Yeah. Brick phone. You know.
The process would be, to me, and I got to have the chairman approve this. What we did with George and what we did with Tinker is we tested it days before, in fact, weeks before. So if somebody wants to do a phone, you need to first request it still from the chairman. We never approve it. The chairman says it's okay for whatever reason they do. He contacts me, and then we will test it a week or two before, and then we'll see if it's stable enough, and then you guys approve whether or not it's okay to you.
Okay, I just was curious.
Yep. Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Legess, Mr. Hess. All those in favor? Those opposed? Have a great day.
You're not quite